Radio Solent.
So 5:05, Steve with you for a Wednesday evening, and in the past few hours, unions in Southampton have announced that hundreds of social work staff will go out on strike next week. It's the latest move in the long-running dispute over cuts to staff pay, and it's prompted an angry reaction from council leaders. In a moment, we'll hear from both the council and the unions on this, but first, our Hampshire and Isle of Wight political reporter Alex Forsyth joins us from our Portsmouth studio. And Alex, this seems to have upped the ante somewhat.
Yes, I think it has, Steve. Until now, the strikes have caused disruption, most notably, of course, the uncollected rubbish. But this seems to have moved things on, as we're no longer talking about streets of black bin bags. Of course, that has had a huge impact on residents, but potentially the impact of this could be much more serious because, of course, social work staff look after vulnerable children and adults. Now, the unions have said that up to 450 staff will go out on strike. The council estimates it's going to be a much lower figure than that, 100 to 150, starting with one day at first next Wednesday, then groups of social workers in turn over the course of following days, then another one-day strike. But I think that when we've had several days of talks between the council and the unions, perhaps there was a feeling that we might be getting towards a resolution. Certainly what the unions have said today and what they've done, this very clear indication, is that this dispute's far from over.
And what's the row here, Alex? Why social workers in particular?
Well, this row has really been over cuts to staff pay, up to 5.5% for the highest earners, the most senior staff at the council, less for lower paid workers, and no cut at all for people earning under £17,500. But in the social work department, some staff, those who work in frontline child protection services, have been given a one-off payment of £1,400. Now, the council says for a long time it's been carrying out a review of salaries in that department, and that extra payment is as a result of that. It's a market supplement to make their pay competitive with other authorities. But the timing of it, when other staff are having pay cut, has caused a lot of anger. And that's really what's led to social work staff in particular going out on strike next week.
Alex, thank you very much. Our political reporter Alex Forsyth there in our Portsmouth studio for us this evening. I'm joined in the studio by Royston Smith, the leader of Southampton City Council, and also Steve Bray from Unison. Evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Evening. Let's start with you, Steve. The accusation that's being levelled at the unions here is that you're putting lives at risk. What do you say to that?
These social workers concerned, we've had 2 meetings with them in the last month, and the members themselves are incensed at the way they've been treated. I think people need to understand it's not just a market supplement that's been paid on top of pay to people. These people have had money taken away from the council, then the council has taken a small group of social workers to make some pay back to them. Even with that adjustment, they're being paid significantly less than colleagues providing those services in Portsmouth or Hampshire. And the council has already lost really good quality, loyal public sector workers who are trying to do a good job running services through very difficult times. And the people concerned, they're not high-paid workers. You've got to remember 90% of the council staff earn less than $35,000. And these people haven't had a pay rise for 2 years, and their colleagues have had a pay cut of around 5%. They're having exactly the same tools trying to make ends meet. And this is a one-day stoppage. The staff concerned have been very clear. We'll put in measures to make sure that vulnerable people are protected on the day, and we'll put in emergency cover. But the members concerned are incensed at the way the council's torn up their contracts and said, you're not worth the pay that you're being received, this contract that you signed, and the way they've been treated is utter contempt by the council, and they want to make sure that is clear. And we're looking for a settlement with the council. We're still seeking negotiations with the council, but the fact that everybody in this council was sacked on the 11th of July, and you have to ask yourself why no other council is taking this action. We're not taking this action, Unison.
Let me give Royston a chance to come back on this. It sounds like there's anger on both sides here then, Royston.
There is. We've been in negotiations with the unions for some time. I've talked about the negotiations that took place some months ago, which weren't negotiations at all in my opinion, but at least we've managed to get around the table now and we've been talking. The unions continue to issue strike notices throughout those negotiations, and we said that wasn't very helpful. In fact, they said that if we made progress within the talks, then they would not issue any more strike notices. What we did say to them, though, we made it really, really clear that we can deal with rubbish on the streets, but we will not risk a child's life or a vulnerable adult.
Well,
and
Steve's
so we
saying they're going to put
specifically
contingencies in place to deal with that.
That's fine, Steve, but I'd like to see that first. If you look at the notice that's been issued today, all the backroom staff, all the management, all those people have been left in, but the safeguarding people are the ones that they are bringing out. Now, that is a dangerous strategy, and I know that those social workers won't want to harm a hair on a child's head, but that's a dangerous strategy to do.
I'm sorry.
And so we will not take any risks with any vulnerable child or any vulnerable adult, and we'll do whatever it takes to make sure that those jobs are covered. And if that means bringing an agency or asking other agencies to provide their staff for us, we will do that.
Go on, Steve,
but that is a high-risk strategy.
The staff concerned are not irresponsible people. These are the people that look after the staff concerned are the people who look after the most vulnerable people in this city week in, week out. At the moment, they are losing colleagues left, right and centre and being asked to cover additional workloads because the council has cut the pay and made those jobs uncompetitive. The council are now paying double the rate for a social worker to pay agency people to do the work they should be paying the correct rate for people to do this job. So it's the work of the council actually putting this service at risk.
We've had a comment from somebody on the phones here, Dan, who works in Southampton, saying the strike by social workers makes him angry. It all seems a bit petty, and I've got to say that part of me sides with that, because it sounds almost, Steve, like this is piggybacking onto an entirely different issue, which was on the brink of being sorted out.
I wish it were on the brink. At the moment this week, it's not just social workers. There are people that do the parking enforcement, the street cleaning, the Itching Bridge, the garage services. They're all on strike this week and all week. This is not an isolated decision. These are a group of staff that we thought very long and hard about whether they come out on strike. We have 2 long and detailed meetings with them. We will make sure there are special contingency plans in place on the day next week, and we'll have further discussions with that group of staff before we bring them out again, if that's appropriate.
Royston,
we hope that is simply not the case. When we spoke in meetings, Steve wasn't in those meetings, so he can't talk with any certainty on that subject. We said that the issue about the pay for social workers was a separate issue, which is why we have launched a review into social care for adults and children. We've asked them to be a part of it. We've asked them to come and help write the terms of reference for that review, and that is a separate issue. And Unison said that is a separate issue. This is nothing to do with this strike.
I'm sorry,
and they have now brought this into it at the 11th hour, when they have already caused 10 weeks of misery for the public in Southampton. They are now asking those most dedicated, those most vocational people of the council to come out.
Let's be clear, this is not the union asking those people. This is the staff themselves. If they put
contingencies in place, then why do they need to strike?
Absolutely disgusted at the way they've been treated by you as a council. It's not happening in any other council in England like this.
That's not true either, is it?
It is true. Now, these are staff that provide the vulnerable in this city with the services they need. And you are understaffed significantly. You are losing people because you have cut their pay, and people cannot afford to live and do that job in this city, and they're leaving to go and work in other councils where they're being paid the rate for the job. This council is undercutting and undermining this service.
Portsmouth, on average, pay 18% less than we do in Southampton. So you need to get all of the facts in front of you, Steve. You haven't been in those meetings. You don't seem to have all the facts at hand.
Mr. Smith,
this is simply not true.
Mr. Smith, it's not about trading insults for this. We want to find a settlement to this. Unison is seeking to find a settlement to this. This is not a different group. We've been clear all along.
Why then, when you said you wouldn't take this group out, did you change your mind?
We haven't said that.
Yeah, in the meetings, we had these meetings, and that was agreed that this was a separate issue. We asked you not to combine the two issues and not to take this group out, and you have decided at the 11th hour to do that.
The council chose to tear up the contract of every single member of staff that it employs, including all of the social workers. They were equally affected. You've taken pay off people that you gave them in April and taken it back away in July. You've cut the pay for an average social worker by 5%. They're all part of the same dispute where you've sacked all of your staff.
My understanding was we passed this D-Day a few weeks ago where these terms and conditions were changed, Steve, and it seems like, people continuing working past that have effectively signed up to those terms and conditions. So what needs to happen for this strike not to take place next Wednesday, as far as you're concerned?
As far as Unison is concerned, in terms of the pay cuts that have been imposed, those pay cuts need to be reversed to avoid this dispute with social workers or the strike that's going on with parking or the bridge or street cleaning or anywhere else. And also, the council have left themselves really vulnerable. I mean, it's a last resort in terms of taking strike action. Also, we don't want to have to take legal claims, but regrettably, we're now looking to take legal claims against the council because the way they've treated people unlawfully. And that's added to the council's burden in terms of their costs.
It's added to the council taxpayers'
let me just point, the council taxpayers will be listening to this and they'll be tearing their hair out, Royston, because all they want to do is to live in a city where their council tax equals their bins being collected, their children's being taken care of, maybe occasionally having to pay a toll on the Itching Bridge, but that's the price that comes along with things. So how do we solve this?
Well, we have made offers to the unions which they haven't accepted. Now, you've just heard what Steve said. They are now striking past the day of implementation to have all of those pay cuts restored. They know that simply can't happen. There is no money to do that. What they also know, and they keep refusing to acknowledge, is that by taking a modest pay cut and the lowest paid not taking a pay cut at all, by taking a modest pay cut, we keep an extra 400 people in the building.
Your own figures have shown very clearly
providing
that figure
services.
Is completely false.
Well, Steve, you don't understand the figures.
No, your own figures that were released by your chief executive showed that would save a maximum of 100. Now, that's clearly an important number.
No, listen,
but to take the amount of money you're taking out of...
Just keep talking over me about something that is factually incorrect.
The amount of money you're taking out of the local economy is damaging. What we should be doing jointly is about being clear that the cuts are too fast, too deep from central government, and the way you're seeking to impose them here is different to anywhere else, that is disadvantageous to the staff and to the people in this city.
We're trying to keep people employed.
You've caused turmoil.
And the unions would rather that people were sacked. They would rather that people were sacked than in work, providing the services that the council taxpayer pay for and value.
Mr. Smith, these are loyal public sector workers that just want to do their job. They didn't expect to have their contracts torn up.
You want us to do what Labour in Southampton wants to do, and that is to sack 1,500. And we will not do that.
Gentlemen, I best leave it there for now. I appreciate you both coming in. I think it's one of these conversations which is going to take a little bit longer than a few minutes.